Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Auction for the Soul. This week's Parsha is Parshat Ekev. Parsha begins with Moshe continuing his speech to the Jewish people, and he starts, "V'haya Ekev tishme'un et mishpatim ha'elu shmartem v'asitem." He says to them, and because you will, if you listen to these ordinances and you keep these mitzvot that God, right, that has provided, that if you go ahead and you keep these ordinances, keep the mitzvot, okay, you keep all the mishpatim, all of the ordinances that God gave you, God will go ahead and He'll protect over you. The brit, the covenant, and the chesed, the kindness that He had performed for you. Now, what Rashi tells us over here is a famous Rashi. He says, "Vaya ekev tishmeun im hamitzvot hakalot shadam dash ba'akvav tishmeun." Right, literally means that if you listen to if you take heed of the minor commandments, which one usually tramples on with his heel, right? Because you don't think that they're important. That is how God will protect you and God will keep His covenant. So what does this mean? The nature of a human being is that we become numb to all sorts of things very quickly. As a matter of fact, any stimuli that we're exposed to for long periods of time, eventually we become numb to all of those things. So what does the Torah tell us? The Torah tells us like this. Sorry for the people watching on Zoom. There's a very bad glare on my screen and getting in the way of your ability, I think, to see me. But mechila, again, I apologize. The idea is like this. Parsha is telling you that when you want to build a relationship with the infinite being, every minute of your existence has meaning to it. Everything that you're involved in should have something of real depth to it. Don't just waste your time doing stupidities. Don't focus on the wrong things. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have fun, it doesn't mean you can't chill, you could do those things. But also, we want you to be mindful that the way in which human beings operate is that we become numb to simple things, right? If I do something over and over again, like this is a great example, friendships. We get too comfortable with friends sometimes, and we're not as careful. We're more lax around them. We don't tippy toe around our friends. We want to be comfortable around them, and that's amazing. But sometimes those friendships where we're too lax, we get into trouble with them. We make mistakes because we're not careful enough about or sensitive enough to their feelings. And the same is true when it comes to any system. You want to go to the gym, amazing, go ahead and work out. But don't ignore cardio. I'm talking to myself right now because you just love doing weights. The small things are just as important as the big things, not just the small muscle groups, the big muscle groups. You got to do it all. You got to diet in there as well. You can't treat the small things as insignificant. They creep up on you. The Torah, Moshe is telling you, "V'haya ekev tishme'un et mishpatim." In the same way that the heel is at the bottom of the feet, the same way that the heel at the end of a person's leg is at the bottom of him, right? In the same way that you could tippy toe around all kinds of things and not feel them, right? You can get yourself to a position where you're desensitized to the things that are super important to you. And Moshe does not want us to have that, and certainly you don't want that. You don't want to be in a position where you're desensitized from the world that you're in. And if you want to live a life of Jewish meaning, the way in which you do that is by sensitizing yourself to the small things, ke'ilu, as if they are the big things. Okay, this reminds me, there's a famous story that is told of a 70-year-old man who's in an intensive care unit. And he says, first, I was dying to finish high school, and then I was dying to finish college, and then I was dying to get married, and then I was dying to have children, and then I was dying for my kids to get older so I can marry them off and then just relax. And then I was dying to retire, and after that, finally, I'm just dying, and I realized that I never ever lived. Right? On the one hand, you're right. Like, we have to make sure that the small things are important. But on the other hand, we also have an obligation to make sure that we take every single moment that we're in and we make it something more meaningful out of it. We don't allow these times to fly right by. Right? If there's one lesson we learned we need to internalize, is that if we want to live a life of meaning, If you want to live a life of greatness, right, you have to utilize your time properly, right? So we got to appreciate every single moment, but particularly the present moment. We don't know how to live in the present. We're always looking for something else. We're always looking outward. We're always looking for other things, right? And this is exactly what the perasha is telling us over here. God says to, let me just find the pasuk over here. It's in chapter 10. God says to Moshe, 1 second, or Mechila, 10, 12. He says, V'ata Yisrael, ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimcha. God said, Moshe says, what does God want from you? He says, what? Ki im liyira et Hashem Elokecha. What does God want? He wants you to fear, to have awe of your Lord. Lelechet b'chol drachav, to walk in His ways. Ulahava oto, and to love Him. Ulaavod et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha. Moshe is telling the Jewish people that God wants us to have a relationship with Him. And the way we make a relationship with the Almighty is by having a little bit of yirah, a little bit of awe, of learning to love Him, to walk in His ways, to do the avodah, the work that requires one to become something bigger, better, and greater. Okay? Can easily be misunderstood. Like, loving God and fearing Him are two of the most difficult commandments in the whole entire Torah. You can feel a police officer who might be giving you a speeding ticket. You could love a spouse, a friend, who loves you and does so many things for you. But those things are all very, very tangible. You can see those things. You can touch those things. There's an actual relationship that's physical that we can understand. But how do we relate to a being that is intangible? How do we express love and fear to something that is so massive, so unreal? So this question was dealt with by Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto in his Mesilat Yesharim. He says as follows. He says there are things that a person must look into and ponder in order to understand God and fear God. The first is that one is actually standing in the presence of God, which means that if we're not trying to make a relationship with God real, it's not going to be real. Okay? You have to be thinking when you're praying that you're standing in front of an all-knowing, all-powerful being who is standing right there in front of you. You have to make that real for yourself. And then you will understand what love and fear is. That's the hardest thing that a person can be involved in. Can a person create a true picture in his heart when he's entirely, unassisted by his physical senses? So Reb Chaim Luzzatto continues and he says that, with a tremendous amount of effort, meditation, repetition on certain thoughts, you could accomplish this level of clarity. You can get yourselves to a place of clarity, a place of complete feeling of standing in front of this infinite being. Now, even if you want to try to bypass, love and fear, right, of God, right? There's another thing that we have to face, right? How can you command love and fear? How is it possible to command an emotion? Either I already love, right, or I fear. But how do you command those things? Usually, when it comes to fulfilling a commandment, right, there's got to be a concrete action that's in place that I can do. That's something that I can accomplish. But how can you command something that one might not be able to accomplish or fulfill? So Harambam, in his famous Yisodei HaTorah, says it like this. He asks the question, what is the path for a person to fear and love God? And he says the same thing like the Ramchal. He says when a person thinks deeply about God's wonders, when he looks at the world and he sees the amazing trees and he sees the sky and the clouds and the canvas of everything around you, it becomes super clear that there's something profound at work. Okay? So he says, when you look at the world and you recognize that everything you see is coming from God's infinite wisdom, right? And none of it is necessary, you will begin to fall in love, you'll begin to praise, you'll begin to glorify and desire greatly the name of God. And when he thinks of these things, he's going to inevitably get to a place of trembling, right? Not becoming afraid, but having awe of God, knowing that we are so small, so low, that we are the smallest things, the smallest intelligences, the smallest intellects, and we're standing in front of this infinite being. If we don't go through that meditation, by the way, this is true in all relationships, how are we reminding ourselves that our relationships are important? Because the nature of all things is that as I spend more time with it, I am dash, it's Ekev, it's like the bottom of my feet. I don't care about it as much. And in the same way that we have to go ahead and sensitize ourselves to things that are important, we need to sensitize ourselves to this idea of building a relationship with the Almighty. So the Rambam is teaching us, and the Ramchal are teaching us, that by just pondering, thinking about God, thinking about His wondrous creations, thinking about, having the humility to recognize all these things were created for you by an infinite being, is how one develops these emotions of love and awe of God. And this is a path each of us must be on. You want to fulfill the commandment of loving and fearing God, right? The only way to do that is by meditating and thinking and appreciating what you have. You can't actively involve yourselves, nor worry about attaining the ultimate goal of feeling an emotion of love and fear. The only thing we can do is embrace the process and the path toward the emotion of love. I don't know if you're going to get there. I don't know if you're going to feel love of God. I don't know if you're going to feel yirat shamayim. But I know one thing, that if you're someone who is constantly working on contemplating, if you're constantly working on feeling this connection, it's in your thoughts. It's something that you're living by, right? Through consistency and dedication to the process, the final goal of love and fear of God will come, right? The process is what needs the focus, not the results. The same thing in the beginning of the parasha, Ekev tishma'un. The small things, we lose that. The process sometimes makes us desensitized, but forget about the goal. Stay here with me right now. Appreciate the moment that you're in right now. Appreciate the things that you have in front of you. Stop thinking about tomorrow. What am I wearing? Where am I going? Just focus on the things that matter most, and you will see that you'll be able to accomplish more and more and more. Who here wants to be a good parent, right? Who here wants your kids, to be loved and respected as a result of your fathering and parenting? Then you, at least once a day, have to take a step back to love what you're doing in the now, right? And being a good mother, father, you have to stop and show love to your children. You want your children to be loved. The only way that's going to happen, my friends, is if you love them. Driving your child to somewhere, talking to them, listening to them, playing ball with them, cleaning something with them after it breaks. Siblings fights. Right? We got to cherish those things now. If not, right, you'll always be looking to get over it. I have a very strong rule with my kids that I didn't want my children ever going on public transportation. For as long as my wife and I could drive, we would drive them. And this would do two things. One is that first of all, there's no supervision on buses. And two is that it gave us time to spend with our children. And I find that this was made a huge difference with our kids. The more time we could spend with our children in the now, the more of an impact we could leave on their souls. You have to be reflective in order to appreciate a process. You got to remove yourself from the microcosm of the now, of the present, and contemplating how this experience fits into the entire picture of what you are trying to accomplish. Focus on the process, not the ultimate goal. Maybe this helps us understand what Shlomo HaMelech said. Shlomo HaMelech in Mishle, in his famous book of Proverbs, says that wisdom lies before an understanding person, but a fool's eyes direct him to the ends of the earth. Right, the eyes of the fool are at the end of the earth, because the fool is never looking at what's there in front of him. He's always looking at the end goal. He's looking at something completely different. And over here, we have a different opportunity to connect to something much more profound. So Shlomo Melech is telling you like this: the Torah is beautiful, it is amazing, it has a unique opportunity to give you the ability to grow yourself into something much more profound, much more amazing. But at the same time, if you start this process and you lessen or weaken your ability to connect to something that is real via always looking for the next thing and not being able to focus on the process itself, you are going to live a life of tremendous amount of regret. You don't want to end up in a place where you're looking back at the world that you're in and saying, I could have wished I would have spent more time thinking of appreciating. No. Yes, you got to appreciate the small things in life, my friends, but we also have to be involved and engaged in the process itself. This is Moshe's message to the Jewish people. You want to live a life of greatness and excellence? What is the process that you find yourself in sensitizing yourself to the world that you're in? How are you preparing a better, greater version of yourself that is able to appreciate the process itself and not worry so much about the goal? Are we always driven by all the things that are distracting us around the world, or are we stopping and creating a space for us to be able to reflect on the things that matter most? I'm wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom Mevarach. May Hashem bless you with the clarity and the recognition that every minute of life is precious, that where you are right now is important, that the sky is blue and the clouds are out and the birds are chirping and the wind is blowing and it's beautiful outside, and all of this was done for you so that you can have this amazing relation with Borei Olam. Marie has this amazing expansive background, like she sees God's work immediately, right? It's beautiful. This was all done for you to enjoy the world that you are in. Never forget that God loves you. All He's asking is for you to create a little space in your heart for Him to let Him in, so that you can go ahead and build this deeper relationship with Him. Shabbat Shalom, and thank you so much for listening.